In a sterile courtroom where silence felt like a verdict, Adrian Cross stood in a wrinkled shirt that hadn't seen an iron in weeks, facing the woman who once promised forever, but now wanted to erase him from their daughter's life. Across the polished floor, Lillian Voss sat flanked by lawyers in suits that cost more than his rent, her expression carved from cold certainty. Everyone in that room had already decided he'd lost. They just didn't know yet that the broken man they were looking at had been a ghost all along, and ghosts don't fight fair, they haunt you until you break. If you want to see how a father with nothing turned a rigged game into his greatest victory, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in courtroom 7B hummed with a frequency that made Adrian's teeth ache. Or maybe that was just the tension. Hard to tell anymore. He sat at a table that wobbled every time he shifted his weight, a cheap particle board thing that the county probably bought in bulk 20 years ago. His lawyer, if you could call him that, was a public defender named Marcus Chen, who looked about 12 years old and smelled like instant ramen. "They're going to come at you hard," Marcus whispered, shuffling through papers that seemed to multiply in his hands. "Your employment history, the apartment, your work schedule. Mrs. Voss has retained Whitmore and Associates. I know who they are," Adrian said quietly. His voice had that quality of someone who'd learned to speak without expecting anyone to listen. Across the aisle, Lillian sat perfectly composed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Adrian had earned in the past 3 months. Her hair was pulled back in a style that looked effortless, but Adrian knew had taken her 45 minutes and 2 YouTube tutorials. He used to time her in the mornings, back when mornings meant something other than cold cereal and a rush to get Sophie to school before his shift started. Next to Lillian sat Gregory Whitmore himself, a man whose silver hair and tailored suit screamed success so loudly that Adrian wanted to cover his ears. Whitmore was flipping through a leather portfolio with the casual confidence of someone who'd never lost at anything that mattered. The door behind the bench opened and everyone stood. Judge Patricia Hernandez entered with the kind of brisk efficiency that suggested she had 17 more cases to get through before lunch. She was in her late 50s, with reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck and an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. "Be seated," she said, settling into her chair with a sigh that spoke of too many years watching families destroy each other in the name of what's best for the children. Adrian's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs, willing them to stop, but they had their own ideas about how terrified he should look. Sophie's face flashed in his mind. Her gap-toothed smile, the way she insisted on wearing mismatched socks because matching is boring, Dad. The sound of her laugh when he did the voice for her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks. He couldn't lose her. The thought of it made his chest feel like someone had reached in and squeezed. "We're here today for a custody modification petition," Judge Hernandez said, glancing at her notes. "Cross versus Voss. Mr. Whitmore, you're representing the petitioner?" Whitmore stood with the smooth motion of someone who knew exactly how impressive he looked. "Yes, Your Honor. Gregory Whitmore of Whitmore and Associates, representing Lillian Voss. We appreciate the court's time today." "Mr. Chen, you're representing the respondent?" Marcus scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over a stack of papers. "Yes, Your Honor. Marcus Chen, Public Defender's Office, representing Adrian Cross." Judge Hernandez's eyes flicked to Adrian for a moment, just long enough for him to see something that might have been pity. He hated it. Pity was what people gave you right before they took everything away. "Mr. Whitmore, you may proceed with your opening statement." Whitmore buttoned his suit jacket with practiced precision. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is fundamentally about what's in the best interest of Sophie Cross, who is 7 years old and deserves stability, security, and a home environment that can adequately provide for her physical, emotional, and educational needs." He paused, letting that sink in. Adrian noticed a woman in the gallery, probably a court observer or social work student, leaning forward slightly. Everyone was always watching, judging. Ms. Voss has remarried a successful entrepreneur, Mr. David Hartwell, and they currently reside in a 4-bedroom home in the Oakmont district. Sophie would have her own bedroom, access to excellent schools, and the kind of consistent parental presence that she currently lacks. Adrian's jaw tightened. Consistent parental presence. The words felt like a slap. Whitmore walked toward the center of the courtroom, his voice taking on a tone of concerned reasonableness. In contrast, Mr. Cross lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in a building that has been cited 3 times for code violations in the past year. He works irregular hours as a warehouse supervisor, often leaving Sophie in the care of... He paused to check his notes, though Adrian was certain he'd memorized every word. A 19-year-old neighbor named Jenna Morales, who has no formal childcare training. Jenna's a college student, Adrian wanted to shout. She's studying early childhood education and Sophie loves her. But Marcus had warned him. Don't interrupt, don't react, don't give them anything to use against you. Mr. Cross's employment records show that in the past 18 months, he's been late to work 47 times and has called in sick on 14 occasions. His income fluctuates significantly month to month, and he has been 30 days late on rent payment twice this year. Every word was a small knife, carefully placed. Adrian could feel the room's perception of him shifting, crystallizing into something pitying and dismissive. The broke dad. The one who tried but couldn't quite hack it. We're not here to vilify Mr. Cross, Whitmore continued, though that's exactly what he was doing. By all accounts, he loves his daughter. But love, Your Honor, isn't always enough. Sophie needs consistency. She needs resources. She needs a home that isn't one broken furnace away from being uninhabitable. Adrian glanced at Marcus, whose expression suggested he was running through legal arguments in his head and coming up short. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. It was going to be a massacre. Whitmore returned to his seat, and Judge Hernandez made a note on her legal pad. Mr. Chen, your opening statement. Marcus stood again, and Adrian could see the sweat beading at his hairline. Your Honor, Mr. Cross has been the primary caregiver for Sophie since the divorce 2 years ago. He has never missed a parent-teacher conference, a doctor's appointment, or a school event. While his financial situation has been challenging, he has consistently prioritized his daughter's well-being above his own comfort. It sounded defensive. Even to Adrian's ears, it sounded like they were already losing. We intend to show that Sophie's best interests are served by maintaining the current custody arrangement, which provides her with the love, attention, and stability she needs from the parent who has been there for her every single day. Judge Hernandez nodded. Mr. Whitmore, call your first witness. Ms. Voss, please take the stand. Lillian rose gracefully, smoothing her skirt as she walked to the witness box. She placed her hand on the Bible, ironic, Adrian thought, given how many promises she'd broken, and swore to tell the truth. Whitmore approached her with the warmth of an old friend, though Adrian knew they'd probably met for the first time 3 weeks ago. Ms. Voss, can you describe your current living situation? Of course. Lillian's voice was clear, measured. She'd always been good at presentations. I live with my husband David in a home we purchased last year. It's in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. Sophie would have her own bedroom, which we've already decorated based on her interests. There's a backyard, a community pool, and how would you describe your relationship with Sophie currently? Strained. Lillian's face arranged itself into an expression of carefully calibrated sadness. I see her every other weekend, and I cherish that time, but it's not enough. She's at a crucial developmental age, and I want to be more present in her daily life. I want to help with homework, make her breakfast, be there when she gets home from school. Why hasn't that been possible under the current arrangement? Adrian has primary custody. My weekends are limited, and he's been resistant to expanding them. That was a lie. Adrian had offered to adjust the schedule 6 times. Lillian was the one who kept canceling, kept finding reasons why this weekend didn't work or that one was complicated. Can you speak to your concerns about Sophie's current living environment? Lillian sighed, and Adrian could see her eyes getting slightly damp. She'd always been able to cry on command. I worry. The apartment building isn't in the best area. Last month there was a break-in 3 doors down from Adrian's unit. The schools in that district are struggling, and Adrian works such long hours. I know he's trying, I really do, but Sophie spends so much time with babysitters. Are you concerned about Mr. Cross's ability to provide for Sophie's needs? I'm concerned about consistency, Lillian said carefully, about whether he can give her the stable home environment she deserves. Whitmore let that sit for a moment before nodding. No further questions, Your Honor. Marcus stood. Adrian could see him trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Ms. Voss, when was the last time you attended one of Sophie's school events? Lillian blinked. It's difficult with my work schedule. So you don't know the answer? I believe it was perhaps her winter concert in December? That was 5 months ago. What about parent-teacher conferences? Adrian usually handles those. Doctor's appointments? Again, Adrian's schedule is more flexible for daytime appointments. So while you're concerned about Mr. Cross's consistency, isn't it true that he's the one who's been consistently present for all of these important events in Sophie's life? I would be present more if I had custody, Lillian said, her voice sharpening slightly. But you don't have a track record of that presence, do you? In fact, haven't you canceled 6 of your last 10 scheduled weekend visits? Whitmore stood. Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Voss's work obligations that would suddenly disappear if she had full custody, Marcus shot back. Gentlemen, Judge Hernandez said quietly. Mr. Chen, rephrase. Marcus took a breath. Ms. Voss, you mentioned wanting to be there for Sophie's daily life, but isn't it true that you work 50 to 60 hours a week as a marketing executive? I could adjust my schedule. Could you? Or are you planning to rely on your husband's schedule flexibility? The same husband who travels for business approximately 15 days per month? Lillian's composure cracked slightly. We would make it work. We have resources that Adrian doesn't. Resources? You mean money? I mean the ability to provide opportunities. Like the opportunity to have a parent actually present, because it seems to me that's exactly what Sophie has now with Mr. Cross. Objection, Whitmore said. Argumentative. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Chen. Marcus nodded, but Adrian could see he'd scored a point. Small, but something. No further questions. Lillian stepped down, and Adrian watched her return to her seat. For just a moment, their eyes met. He tried to read what was there: regret, determination, guilt, anger, but her face had already reset to careful neutrality. Mr. Whitmore, your next witness? We called Dr. Patricia Morrison, clinical child psychologist. A woman in her 60s approached the stand, her gray hair cropped short, her expression professional. She wore a simple black suit and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd testified in family court 100 times before. After being sworn in, she settled into the witness chair like she owned it. Dr. Morrison, you've reviewed the case materials for Sophie Cross? I have. And what are your professional concerns regarding her current living situation? Dr. Morrison consulted a small notebook. Children Sophie's age require stability and routine. Mr. Cross's work schedule creates inconsistency in her daily life. She has multiple caregivers throughout the week, which can lead to attachment issues and anxiety. Have you personally evaluated Sophie? I conducted 2 sessions with her over the past month. And your findings? Sophie is a bright, engaging child, but she exhibits signs of stress. She's been having nightmares. Her teacher reports difficulty concentrating in class. These are classic indicators of environmental instability. Adrian's hands clenched under the table. Sophie had nightmares because Lillian had started talking about custody changes. He'd held her through 3 of them, whispered that everything would be okay, promised her nothing would change, and now this woman was using his daughter's fear against him. In your professional opinion, would Sophie benefit from a more structured home environment? Absolutely. Children thrive on predictability. Ms. Voss can offer that. Marcus stood for cross-examination, and Adrian could see him calculating angles. Dr. Morrison, you mentioned conducting 2 sessions with Sophie. How long was each session? 50 minutes. So you spent a total of 100 minutes with her, less than 2 hours. That's sufficient for an initial evaluation. Is it? Mr. Cross has spent thousands of hours with Sophie over the past 7 years. Do you think your 100 minutes gives you better insight into her needs than her father's 7 years? I'm a trained professional. Who met her twice? Did you ask Sophie who she wants to live with? Dr. Morrison hesitated. I did. And what did she say? She said she wants to live with her father. The courtroom got very quiet. But children that age, Dr. Morrison continued quickly, don't always know what's best for them. They're emotionally attached to familiarity, even when that familiarity isn't serving their long-term interests. So when Sophie says she wants to stay with her dad, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But when you say she needs to leave him, that's professional expertise? Objection, Whitmore said. Counsel is mischaracterizing the witness's testimony. Withdrawn. Marcus paused. You mentioned Sophie's nightmares. Did you ask her what the nightmares were about? She described them as dreams about being taken away. Taken away from what? She didn't specify. Did you ask her? Did you ask Sophie what she was afraid of being taken away from? Dr. Morrison's expression tightened. She said she dreamed about being taken away from her dad. Marcus let that hang in the air. No further questions. The morning wore on. Whitmore called character witnesses, people from Lillian's life who spoke glowingly about her parenting skills, though most of them admitted they'd never actually seen her with Sophie. He presented financial documents showing the stark disparity between Lillian's resources and Adrian's. He submitted photographs of the Oakmont house, with its manicured lawn and Sophie's hypothetical bedroom decorated in purple and gold. Through it all, Adrian sat silent, taking notes, watching, listening to his life be dissected and found wanting. When the court broke for lunch, Marcus pulled Adrian into a small conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. "We're getting killed out there," Marcus said, loosening his tie. "Whitmore's building a narrative of financial instability and inconsistent care. We need to counter with something strong." "Like what?" Adrian's voice was flat. "Your testimony. You're our best witness. We need to show the judge that you're not just some struggling single dad. You're Sophie's father. You know her. You understand her needs. You've sacrificed everything for her." "They don't care about sacrifice. They care about money." "That's not true. Judge Hernandez has 3 kids of her own. She understands that parenting isn't about bank accounts." Adrian wanted to believe him. He really did, but everything he'd seen that morning suggested otherwise. They ate sandwiches from a vending machine, turkey and cheese that tasted like cardboard, and returned to the courtroom. "Mr. Chen, call your first witness." The defense calls Adrian Cross. Adrian stood, his legs steadier than he expected, and walked to the witness stand. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. From this angle, he could see the whole courtroom. Lillian watching him with an expression he couldn't read. The observers in the gallery, probably students or interns, taking notes. Judge Hernandez, her face neutral but her eyes sharp. "Mr. Cross," Marcus began, "can you describe your relationship with Sophie?" Adrian took a breath. "She's everything. She's my daughter. I've been there since the day she was born. I was the one who walked the floor with her when she had colic. I taught her to ride a bike. I'm the one she calls when she has a bad dream or needs help with her homework or just wants someone to listen to a story about what happened at recess. You work full-time as a warehouse supervisor. How do you balance that with parenting?" "It's not easy. I work early mornings mostly, 4 a.m. to noon when I can get those shifts. That way I'm there when she gets home from school. When I have to work later, Jenna watches her, and Jenna's great. She does art projects with Sophie, helps with reading. It's not perfect, but I make it work." "Mr. Whitmore mentioned that you've been late to work 47 times. Can you explain that?" "Yeah, Sophie's had strep throat twice this year. There was that stomach bug that went around her class. She had to get glasses, and the appointment ran long. Every time I was late, it was because Sophie needed something, and she comes first, always." "Your apartment." Mr. Whitmore characterized it as inadequate. "It's small. 1 bedroom. Sophie has the bedroom. I sleep on a pull-out couch in the living room. The building's old, yeah, but it's clean. We're 3 blocks from her school. The landlord's actually pretty responsive when something breaks. And yeah, there was a break-in down the hall, but nothing happened to us. I keep the door locked. We're safe." Marcus walked him through the details of their daily life. How Adrian packed Sophie's lunches with notes tucked inside. How they had a routine every night, dinner, homework, 1 episode of whatever show she was into, then reading before bed. How he kept a calendar on the fridge with all her activities color-coded. "Mr. Cross, why do you think you should retain primary custody of Sophie?" Adrian looked directly at the judge. "Because I know her. I know that she hates peas, but she'll eat them if you hide them in mac and cheese. I know that she's scared of thunderstorms, but she's trying to be brave about it. I know that her favorite color changed from pink to purple last month, and that she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, except on Tuesdays when she wants to be a professional ice skater." He could feel his voice getting rougher. "I know that when she's sad, she gets really quiet, and you have to sit with her and wait until she's ready to talk. I know that she sleeps with her stuffed elephant Mr. Trunks and 3 specific blankets in a specific order. I know all of this because I'm there, every day. Not because I have money or a big house or fancy lawyers. Because I showed up. Because she's mine and I'm hers, and that's not something you can buy or replace. The courtroom was very quiet. No further questions, Marcus said softly. Whitmore stood and Adrian braced himself. Mr. Cross, you paint a very touching picture of fatherhood, but let's talk about reality. Your current income, what would you estimate it is annually? Around $38,000. And Ms. Voss and her husband's combined household income? I don't know exactly. It's approximately $400,000. Do you see the disparity there? Money isn't everything. No, but it provides opportunities. Sophie could attend a private school with smaller class sizes and specialized programs. She could have music lessons, sports camps, travel opportunities. Can you provide those things? I can provide what matters. Can you, though? You mentioned being late to work 47 times. Have you ever been at risk of losing your job? Adrian hesitated. My supervisor knows I'm reliable. That's not what I asked. Have you ever been warned about your attendance? Once. Yeah. And if you lost your job, how would you support Sophie? I'd find another one. In this economy, with a spotty work record, how long would that take? What would you do in the meantime? I'd figure it out. I always do. Whitmore nodded slowly, like Adrian had just confirmed something disappointing but expected. You mentioned that Sophie sleeps in the bedroom while you take the couch. How long can that arrangement continue? She's 7 now. In a few years, she'll be a teenager. Don't you think she deserves her own space? She has her own space. Her room is hers. And what about you? Don't you deserve a bedroom? I don't care about that. But Sophie might. As she gets older, she might feel guilty that her father doesn't have a proper bedroom. She might feel like a burden. She's not a burden. No, but circumstances can make children feel that way, can't they? The fact that you work so hard, that you're always scrambling, that you have to choose between paying rent on time and buying her new shoes. Don't you think she notices? Mr. Cross, I'm not questioning your love for your daughter, but love doesn't pay for braces. It doesn't fund college savings. It doesn't provide stability when the furnace breaks in winter. At what point does your insistence on maintaining custody become less about what's best for Sophie and more about your own need to be needed? The words hit like a physical blow. Adrian felt something crack inside his chest. It's not about me. It's about her. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're prioritizing your relationship with Sophie over her actual well-being. You're so focused on being her hero that you can't see you're holding her back. Objection. Marcus was on his feet. Your Honor, counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Whitmore, ask questions, don't make speeches. But the damage was done. Adrian could see it in the judge's face, in the way she was taking notes. No further questions, Whitmore said, returning to his seat with the satisfied air of someone who'd just landed a killing blow. Adrian stepped down, his legs shaking now, and returned to his seat. Marcus leaned over to whisper something encouraging, but Adrian couldn't hear him over the roaring in his ears. The afternoon continued with more witnesses. A social worker who'd visited Adrian's apartment and noted its cramped conditions. A financial advisor who testified about the long-term costs of raising a child and Adrian's inability to meet them. Each person was professional, sympathetic, and devastating. By the time Judge Hernandez called for a 15-minute recess before closing arguments, Adrian felt hollowed out. He'd sat through hours of people picking apart his life, and he hadn't been able to say any of the things that mattered. How Sophie laughed at his stupid jokes, how she held his hand in parking lots even though she was getting too old for it, how she told him she loved him every single night without him having to ask. None of that had made it into the testimony. It had all been reduced to numbers and square footage and income brackets. Marcus tried to talk strategy during the break, but Adrian barely listened. What was the point? They were going to lose. The judge was going to decide that a bigger house and a fatter bank account were better than the man who'd been there for every scraped knee and bad dream and first day of school. When they reconvened, Whitmore's closing argument was polished and persuasive. He spoke about opportunities and advantages, about giving Sophie the best possible chance at success. He made it sound noble, this thing they were trying to do. Like taking her away from Adrian was actually an act of love. Marcus did his best, talking about bonds and consistency and emotional security. But even to Adrian's ears, it sounded weak compared to Whitmore's glossy vision of Sophie's future. Judge Hernandez listened to both sides, her expression giving nothing away. When the arguments concluded, she looked at her notes for a long moment. This court will take a brief recess to consider the testimony and evidence presented. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes for a ruling. 30 minutes. Adrian's entire life, Sophie's entire future, would be decided in 30 minutes. He stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, unable to sit still. Other cases were happening in other rooms. He could hear fragments of arguments, a baby crying somewhere, the low murmur of plea negotiations, the justice system grinding forward, processing human lives like paperwork. Marcus tried to reassure him, but Adrian wasn't listening. He was thinking about Sophie, about how he was going to explain this to her. How do you tell a 7-year-old that the world decided someone else could parent her better? How do you look in her eyes and say, you tried your best, but your best wasn't good enough? Mr. Cross? Adrian turned. A woman stood there, maybe mid-40s, holding a folder. She had kind eyes and a tired smile. I'm Sharon Delgado. I'm the Family Services Coordinator assigned to this case. I wanted to give you something before the ruling. She handed him the folder. Inside were drawings. Sophie's drawings, pages and pages of them. Stick figures that were clearly meant to be the two of them. Hearts and rainbows. Their apartment building rendered in crayon. One showed them at the park. Another showed them making pancakes, with syrup dripping everywhere. A third simply said, I love you, Dad, in wobbly letters. She gave these to me during one of our visits, Sharon said quietly. I thought you should have them. Adrian's hands were shaking as he looked through each page. Every drawing was a memory, a moment they'd shared. None of them were in big houses or expensive restaurants. They were just life. Their life. Whatever happens in there, Sharon said, nodding toward the courtroom, you should know that little girl loves you fiercely. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I know what a parent-child bond looks like. You have it. That's not nothing. It's not enough, though, is it? Adrian's voice cracked. Sharon didn't answer. She just squeezed his shoulder and walked away. The 30 minutes felt like 30 seconds. Before Adrian was ready, they were being called back into the courtroom. He took his seat, clutching Sophie's drawings like a lifeline. Judge Hernandez entered, and everyone stood. When she settled into her chair, she didn't immediately speak. Instead, she looked at Adrian, then at Lillian, then down at her notes. This is always the hardest part of my job, she began. Two people who once loved each other enough to create a child, now asking me to choose between them. There's no winner in these cases, only different kinds of loss. Adrian's heart was pounding so hard, he thought everyone could hear it. I've reviewed all the testimony and evidence. I've considered the financial disparities, the living conditions, the work schedules, and the character witnesses. I've thought about what Ms. Voss can provide and what Mr. Cross has provided. She paused, and the silence stretched. I've also thought about Sophie and what she needs. Not what we adults think she needs, but what she's communicated through her actions and words. According to Dr. Morrison's testimony, which I found troubling in its dismissiveness of the child's own stated preferences, Sophie explicitly expressed a desire to remain with her father. Adrian felt something shift in his chest, a small ember of hope. While financial resources are certainly a factor in determining a child's welfare, they are not the only factor. Consistency, emotional security, and the strength of the parent-child bond must also be considered. The evidence shows that Mr. Cross, despite his financial limitations, has been the consistent primary caregiver since the divorce. He has prioritized Sophie's needs, maintained her routines, and been present for the daily moments that constitute childhood. Judge Hernandez looked directly at Lillian. Ms. Voss, your intentions appear genuine, but intention is not the same as track record. You've missed numerous scheduled visits, you haven't attended school events, and you work long hours that would require significant childcare support. The very inconsistencies you criticize in Mr. Cross's arrangement would likely persist or worsen in yours. Lillian's face went pale. However, the judge continued, and Adrian's hope faltered, I am concerned about the adequacy of Mr. Cross's current living situation. A one-bedroom apartment is not appropriate for the long term. The building's code violations, while addressed, indicate potential ongoing issues. She looked at Adrian. Mr. Cross, I'm going to give you 6 months. In that time, I expect you to secure a 2-bedroom residence in acceptable condition. You'll need to provide documentation of stable employment and income. We'll reconvene to review your progress. In the interim, I'm maintaining the current custody arrangement with Mr. Cross, retaining primary physical custody. Ms. Voss, your visitation schedule will remain unchanged. If either party wishes to modify this arrangement, you may petition the court at the 6-month review. She brought down the gavel. We're adjourned. For a moment, Adrian couldn't process what had happened. He'd won. He hadn't lost Sophie, not today, not yet. Marcus was grinning, shaking his hand, saying something about great outcome and reasonable requirements. But Adrian was already standing, already moving toward the door. Across the aisle, Lillian sat frozen, her perfect composure finally shattered. Whitmore was packing his briefcase with sharp, angry movements. They'd expected to win. They'd been certain. Adrian didn't stop to gloat. He walked out of the courtroom, down the hallway, and pushed through the double doors into the late afternoon sunlight. His phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. Sophie wants to know if she can have ice cream before dinner. I told her you'd decide when you got home. Home. He still had a home to go to. She was still his. Adrian stood on the courthouse steps, Sophie's drawing still clutched in one hand, and for the first time in months, he let himself breathe. Really breathe. The air tasted like freedom and second chances and the faint smell of rain that was coming. He'd need to find a new apartment, figure out how to make the numbers work, prove to Judge Hernandez that he could provide the stability she was looking for. It wouldn't be easy. None of it had ever been easy. But he'd done the impossible today. He'd stood in a room full of people who'd already written him off, who'd looked at his wrinkled shirt and his beat-up shoes and decided he didn't measure up, and he'd survived. Sophie was still his. The rain started as he walked to his car, a '98 Honda Civic that needed new brakes and made a concerning rattling sound when he went over 45. He got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. In 6 months, he'd be back in that courtroom. They'd review his progress, judge whether he'd met their standards. But for now, for today, he had Sophie. He had tonight's dinner to make, homework to check, a bedtime story to read. The drawings sat on the passenger seat, their crayon colors bright against the worn upholstery. In one of them, Sophie had drawn the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. Above it, in her careful printing, "Me and Dad forever." Adrian reached over and touched the page gently, as if it might disappear. Forever was a long time, but he'd take it one day at a time. One shift, one rent payment, one bedtime routine. That's all parenting ever was, really. Showing up, being there. Choosing your kid over and over until choosing them becomes as natural as breathing. He drove through the rain toward their small apartment, toward Sophie and whatever frozen pizza they'd heat up for dinner, toward the pull-out couch where he'd sleep and the bedroom where she'd drift off clutching Mr. Trunks. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a 4-bedroom house in Oakmont with a manicured lawn, but it was theirs, and for now, that was enough. Tomorrow, he'd start looking for a bigger place. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to make the impossible work. But tonight, he'd just be her dad, in all the small, ordinary ways that mattered. The rain came down harder, and Adrian turned on the wipers. They squeaked across the windshield in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Steady, persistent, still here. Still here. The apartment smelled like burnt cheese when Adrian opened the door. Sophie was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with Jenna, both of them covered in what looked like pizza sauce and an alarming amount of flour. "We tried to make it from scratch," Jenna said apologetically, gesturing toward the kitchen where smoke was still clearing from the oven. "I thought it would be fun." Sophie jumped up, her face splitting into that gap-toothed grin that made Adrian's chest ache. "Dad, did you win? Are you staying my dad?" He dropped to his knees and caught her as she launched herself at him. "Yeah, baby, I'm staying your dad." "Forever?" "Forever." She squeezed him so hard he thought his ribs might crack, and he didn't care. He held her and breathed in the smell of her shampoo and pizza sauce. And for a few seconds, the world felt right again. "I told Mom I wanted to live with you," Sophie said into his shoulder. "I told the lady with the notebook, too. Did it help?" It helped a lot. Jenna was gathering her things, shoving textbooks into a backpack that looked like it weighed 40 pounds. "I should go. I've got a paper due tomorrow that I haven't even started." "Thank you," Adrian said. "For everything. I mean it." She waved him off, but her smile was genuine. "Sophie's the easiest kid I've ever watched. Plus she helped me study for my child development midterm. Didn't you, Soph?" I was a demonstration, Sophie said proudly. After Jenna left, Adrian surveyed the kitchen disaster. There was dough on the ceiling. He had no idea how they'd managed that. And the pizza itself was a charred disc that looked like something excavated from Pompeii. Okay, he said. New plan. How about we order actual pizza and clean this up tomorrow? Can we get the kind with the stuffed crust? Yeah, we can get whatever you want. While they waited for the delivery, Sophie showed him her homework, a worksheet about multiplication that she'd already finished. Her handwriting was getting better, the numbers less shaky than they'd been a month ago. Mrs. Patterson says I'm doing really good in math, she said. She says if I keep working hard, I might be ready for the advanced group next year. That's great, Soph. Will I still be in her class next year, or will I have to go to a different school? The question caught him off guard. Why would you go to a different school? I don't know. I just thought Mom was talking about schools near her house. I thought maybe I'd have to switch. Adrian pulled her onto the couch next to him. You're staying right here. Same school, same friends, same Mrs. Patterson. Nothing's changing. Promise? Promise. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. Judge Hernandez had given him 6 months to find a better apartment. That might mean a different neighborhood, a different school district. He'd have to figure it out carefully, make sure whatever he chose kept Sophie's life as stable as possible. The pizza arrived. Stuffed crust, extra cheese, pepperoni on half because Sophie had recently decided she didn't like pepperoni anymore but might change her mind tomorrow. They ate sitting on the living room floor because the kitchen table was still covered in flour. Dad? Yeah? What happened in court today? Like, for real? Not just the end part. Adrian chose his words carefully. Mom's lawyers asked a lot of questions about our apartment and my job. They wanted to know if you were happy here. I told them I was happy. I know you did. Did they believe me? I think so. The judge did anyway. Sophie chewed thoughtfully on her pizza. Mom cried when I said I wanted to live with you. Not a lot, but I saw. Your mom loves you too, Soph. She thinks she can give you things I can't. Like what? Like a bigger house and money for activities and stuff. Sophie considered this. I don't want a bigger house. My room's already too big. It's scary at night. Adrian almost laughed. Their whole apartment could fit inside one floor of Lillian's house, and Sophie thought her tiny bedroom was too big. What if we got a bigger place, though? He asked. Would that be okay? Still with me, just more space? As long as Mr. Trunks approves. Obviously, Mr. Trunks has final say on all major life decisions. She giggled, and the sound loosened something that had been tight in Adrian's chest all day. After dinner, they did their usual routine. Sophie brushed her teeth while Adrian picked out a book from the stack beside her bed. Tonight she chose a story about a bear who was afraid of the dark. He'd read it to her probably 50 times, and she still asked for it at least twice a week. Dad? She said when he was tucking her in. Are you scared sometimes? Of what? I don't know, just stuff. He sat on the edge of her bed. Yeah, I get scared sometimes. What do you do when you're scared? Well, I remind myself that being scared doesn't mean something bad's going to happen. It just means I care a lot about the outcome. And then I try to focus on what I can control and let go of what I can't. She thought about this, her small face serious. That sounds hard. It is hard. But you know what helps? What? Having you. When I'm scared, I think about you, and it makes me braver. She smiled sleepily, already starting to drift. You make me braver, too. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked open the way she liked. Then he went to the living room and collapsed on the pull-out couch that was already half deployed because he'd been too tired to fold it up that morning. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Congrats again. Call me Monday and we'll discuss next steps. Next steps. Finding an apartment that met the judge's standards on a salary that barely covered the place he had now. Adrian pulled up a rental website and started scrolling through listings. 2-bedroom apartments in decent neighborhoods started at $1,400 a month, $300 more than he was paying now. And most wanted first month, last month, and a security deposit up front. That was $4,200 he didn't have. He closed the app before the panic could fully set in. One problem at a time. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Adrian Cross? Yeah? This is Robert Mendez. I'm the regional manager for Westfield Logistics. Your supervisor, Tom Brady, mentioned you might be interested in a position we have opening up. Adrian sat up straighter. I didn't know there was a position. It's a floor supervisor role. Better hours, 7 to 3:30, weekdays only. Salary instead of hourly. Tom says you've been doing the work of a supervisor for the past year anyway, just without the title or the pay. I'd definitely be interested. Good. Can you come in Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, my office at the main warehouse? Absolutely, thank you. When he hung up, Adrian sat there for a moment, not quite believing it. A real salary. Weekday-only hours. It wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. The next morning, Sophie had a field trip to the Science Museum. Adrian packed her lunch, made sure she had her permission slip, and walked her to school. Other parents were there too, the morning drop-off crowd that he usually missed because of his early shifts. A few of them glanced at him, and he wondered if any of them had heard about the custody case. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone's business. Mr. Cross? He turned. Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was waving him over. She was in her 50s with curly gray hair and reading glasses that were always either perched on her nose or dangling from a chain. I wanted to tell you, Sophie's been doing wonderfully lately. Her reading scores improved 2 grade levels this semester. That's great to hear. She works so hard, and she's always talking about things you two do together. The library visits, the cooking experiments. Mrs. Patterson smiled. You can tell when a child has a parent who's engaged. It makes all the difference. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Thank you. That means a lot. After drop-off, he went home and started researching apartments. He made a spreadsheet, something he'd never thought he'd do voluntarily, with columns for rent, deposit, neighborhood, school district, and distance from Sophie's current school. The numbers were depressing no matter how he arranged them. His phone rang. Lillian. He stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Adrian. Lillian. Silence. Then, we should talk. About what? About yesterday. About what happens now. The judge already decided what happens now. I know, but we need to figure out the details. Visitation, communication, how we're going to co-parent going forward. Adrian almost laughed. Co-parent. Like they'd been a team this whole time instead of 2 people locked in a slow-motion battle. Fine. When? I'm free Thursday evening. We could meet somewhere neutral, get coffee, talk like adults. Thursday. The same day as his interview with Westfield. I can do 6 o'clock, that coffee shop on Maple, the one with the outdoor seating. I'll be there. She hung up without saying goodbye. Some things never changed. Thursday came faster than Adrian wanted. He spent Wednesday night trying on different shirts, trying to find something that said responsible supervisor material without looking like he was trying too hard. He settled on a blue button-down that was only slightly wrinkled in khakis that he'd ironed into submission. The interview with Robert Mendez went better than expected. Mendez was in his early 40s, built like someone who'd worked the warehouse floor himself before climbing the ladder. He asked about Adrian's experience, his management style, how he handled conflicts. Tom says you're the guy everyone goes to when there's a problem, Mendez said. That true? I don't know about everyone, but yeah, I try to help when I can. Why? Because we're all just trying to get through the day. If I can make someone's job easier, why wouldn't I? Mendez nodded slowly. The position starts at $52,000 a year, Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30. 2 weeks paid vacation, health benefits kick in after 90 days. You'd be managing a team of about 15, overseeing inventory systems, and coordinating with distribution. $52,000. That was almost $15,000 more than he was making now. It was the kind of money that meant he could afford a decent 2-bedroom apartment and maybe even start a college fund for Sophie. When would I start? 2 weeks. We need to finish processing the current supervisor's resignation paperwork. Mendez extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Adrian. Adrian shook it, trying to keep his expression professional when what he really wanted to do was call Sophie and tell her everything was going to be okay. He left the warehouse feeling lighter than he had in months. The promotion meant stability. It meant he could show Judge Hernandez at the 6-month review that he'd improved his situation. It meant he could actually build the life Sophie deserved. By 6 o'clock, some of that optimism had faded. He sat at a table outside the coffee shop, watching Lillian's Mercedes pull into the parking lot. She emerged looking like she'd come straight from a photo shoot. Tailored pants, silk blouse, sunglasses that probably cost more than his car payment. Adrian. She sat down across from him, setting her purse on the chair between them like a barrier. Lillian, you look good. Different. I had a job interview. Her eyebrows rose. Oh? Promotion. Supervisor position. Something flickered across her face. Surprise maybe, or annoyance that he was doing better than expected. That's great. Congratulations. Thanks. A waitress came over and they ordered black coffee for him, some kind of complicated latte for her. When they were alone again, Lillian folded her hands on the table. I'm not going to apologize for trying to get custody, she said. I genuinely thought it was the right thing for Sophie. But you were wrong. Maybe. Or maybe we both want what's best for her and we just disagree on what that looks like. Adrian took a sip of coffee to buy himself time. You've missed 6 of your last 10 visits with her. I know. Work will always be something. There will always be a reason. But Sophie notices. She asks me why you cancel. Lillian's jaw tightened. What do you tell her? I tell her you're busy. I tell her you love her. I don't tell her that it feels like you only want custody when it's convenient for your image. That's not fair. Isn't it? You remarried a guy with money and suddenly you want to play full-time mom again. But when you actually had the chance to be in her life consistently, you chose work instead. You don't know what it's like, Lillian said, and there was real heat in her voice now. Trying to rebuild after a divorce, trying to prove yourself in a career that already dismisses women, trying to create a life that isn't defined by failure. I know exactly what it's like. I've been doing it for 2 years with a fraction of your resources. They stared at each other across the table. The tension was thick enough to cut. Finally, Lillian looked away. David wants kids of his own. We've been talking about it. And I thought, I don't know. I thought if I had Sophie full-time, I could prove to him that I'm good at this. That I can be a mother and a wife and still have my career. Sophie's not a test run for your next family. I know that. Her voice cracked slightly. I do know that. But every time I see her, I feel like I'm failing. Like she's pulling away from me and I don't know how to stop it. Adrian wanted to stay angry. It would be easier to stay angry. But he could hear the genuine pain in Lillian's voice, and despite everything, part of him still remembered loving this woman. You want to stop it? He said quietly. Show up. Not when it's convenient. Not when you've got something to prove. Just show up. Take her for ice cream on a random Tuesday. Come to her school play even if it means leaving work early. Text her goodnight when it's not your weekend. Be consistent. I can try. Don't try. Do it or don't. Sophie deserves better than try. Lillian nodded slowly. You're right. You've been right about a lot of things, and I've been so focused on what I could give her materially that I forgot she just wants her mom. Yeah. They sat in silence for a while, drinking their coffee. Around them, other people were living their normal lives, couples on dates, friends catching up, someone working on a laptop. Nobody knew they were watching a fractured family try to figure out how to exist in the same world. The judge wants me to find a 2-bedroom apartment, Adrian said finally. I got the promotion, which helps, but the upfront costs are still rough. And I need to stay in this school district, which limits my options. I could help. No. Adrian, I said no. I'll figure it out myself. Lillian looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression must have stopped her. Okay, but if you change your mind, the offer stands. I won't. She finished her latte and stood. I'll see Sophie this weekend, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, and I won't cancel. Good. And Adrian, thank you for not making her hate me. You could have. You would have had every right to. He watched her walk back to her Mercedes, watched her drive away. Then he sat there for another 20 minutes, drinking his coffee and trying to process the conversation. When he got home, Sophie was in the living room with Jenna, building an elaborate structure out of cardboard boxes and tape. It's a castle, Sophie explained, for Mr. Trunks. He's royalty. Obviously, Adrian said, all elephants are royalty. It's basic biology. Jenna laughed. I'm going to use that in my child development paper. According to my research, all elephants are royalty. After Jenna left, Adrian helped Sophie finish the castle. They used markers to draw windows and a drawbridge, and Sophie insisted on making a flag out of an old sock and a chopstick. Mom's going to see you Saturday, he said while they were working. 10 o'clock. She promised she wouldn't cancel. Sophie looked up from her drawing. Really? Really? Okay. She went back to coloring, but Adrian could see the small smile on her face. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Adrian sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and his depressing spreadsheet. He'd added his new salary to the calculations, which helped, but not enough. He was still coming up short on the deposit for any decent two-bedroom in the area. He thought about Lillian's offer to help. His pride wanted to reject it automatically, but maybe that was stupid. Maybe accepting help wasn't the same as admitting defeat. No, he'd figure it out himself. He had to. His phone buzzed, a text from Tom, his soon-to-be former supervisor. Heard about the promotion, well-deserved, man. You've been carrying this shift for months. Adrian smiled. It was a small thing, but it felt good to be recognized. Over the next few weeks, Adrian fell into a new rhythm. He worked his final shifts at the warehouse, training his replacement and wrapping up loose ends. He took Sophie to school every morning and picked her up every afternoon. He searched for apartments during lunch breaks and after bedtime, slowly narrowing his options. Lillian kept her promise. She showed up Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and she came back the next weekend too. The visits weren't perfect. She was still awkward sometimes, still tried too hard to buy Sophie's affection with expensive gifts, but she was there. That was something. Sophie seemed lighter. The nightmares stopped. Her teacher reported that she was more focused in class, more engaged with her friends. It was like knowing her world wasn't going to fall apart had freed her to just be a kid again. Adrian's new job started on a Monday. The hours were strange at first. Leaving the house at 6:30 instead of 3:30 in the morning felt almost decadent. He wore his button-down shirts and tried to project confidence while internally having no idea what he was doing. But the team was good. They responded to his management style, which was mostly just treating people like humans instead of inventory. Within 2 weeks, their efficiency numbers were up and the complaints were down. You're doing well, Mendez told him during a check-in meeting. Keep it up, and there might be other opportunities down the line. Other opportunities. A year ago, Adrian would have laughed at the idea. Now it felt possible. He found an apartment in early June, 3 weeks before the deadline Judge Hernandez had given him. It was a 2-bedroom in an older building, nothing fancy, but it was clean and safe and only 5 blocks from Sophie's school. The rent was $13.50 a month, which was tight, but manageable with his new salary. The deposit was the problem. First month, last month, security deposit. That was $4,050 due up front. He'd been saving everything he could, but between regular expenses and Sophie's needs, he'd only managed to scrape together $2,800. He was $1,250 short. Adrian sat in his car outside the apartment building, looking at the lease application on his phone. The landlord had given him 48 hours to come up with the money or the place would go to someone else. And this was the best option he'd found. Everything else was either too expensive, too far from Sophie's school, or in neighborhoods that made him nervous. He thought about Lillian's offer again. $1,250 was nothing to her. She probably spent that much on a single shopping trip. One call, and his problem would be solved. But the cost wouldn't just be money. It would be admitting that he couldn't do this alone. It would be proving her right, that he needed her resources, that his love wasn't enough. His phone rang. Marcus. Hey, Adrian, just checking in. How's the apartment hunt going? Found a place. Just working out the details. Good. Because I got a call from Lillian's lawyer today. She's requesting a modification to the visitation schedule. Wants to add 1 weeknight per week in addition to weekends. Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. She can't just change the agreement. She can request a modification. The judge would have to approve it, but given that Lillian's been consistent with her current visits, it's possible Hernandez would grant it. Sophie's got homework, activities, a routine. She can't just... I know, but Lillian's building a case that she's re-engaged with Sophie's life. More consistent presence might actually be good for her petition. Shows stability. Adrian closed his eyes. What do you think I should do? Talk to Sophie, see how she feels about it. And document everything, every visit, every phone call, every interaction. If this goes back to court, we need to show that you're being cooperative while also protecting Sophie's best interests. After they hung up, Adrian sat there for a long time. Everything was changing so fast. The promotion, the apartment, Lillian's renewed involvement in Sophie's life. A month ago, he'd been barely holding on. Now he was building something better, but it felt fragile. Like one wrong move could bring it all crashing down. He looked at the lease application again. 48 hours. Then he made a decision. He called the landlord first thing the next morning and asked for an extension, just 3 more days. The landlord, a woman named Rita Kowalski, who sounded like she'd been renting apartments since the Carter administration, sighed heavily into the phone. "I've got 2 other applications, Mr. Cross. Good applications. People ready to move in next week. I understand. I just need a few more days to get the deposit together. I've got the job, I've got the references. I just need time for my paycheck to clear." That was a lie. His paycheck wouldn't cover the shortfall. But he was working on a plan, and he needed time to make it happen. 3 days, Rita said. "But if I get someone with cash in hand before then, I'm taking it. I can't afford to hold units. Thank you, I appreciate it." He hung up and immediately started making calls. First to his bank, asking about a personal loan. They laughed at him, politely, but it was still a laugh. His credit score was hovering somewhere in the mid-500s, destroyed by the divorce, and 2 years of barely making minimum payments on everything. Next, he tried a payday loan place. They'd give him the money, but the interest rate was criminal. He'd be paying it off for the next year, and the math made his head hurt. He was sitting at his desk at the warehouse, staring at his phone, when one of his team members knocked on the door frame. Carlos, a guy in his mid-20s who'd been working inventory for 3 years. "Hey boss, you got a minute?" Adrian waved him in. Carlos sat down, fidgeting with a pen. "So, I heard through the grapevine you're looking for a place. 2-bedroom. Word traveled fast. Yeah, found one, just trying to make the numbers work. How short are you?" Adrian hesitated. He didn't like discussing his financial problems with people who worked for him, but there was something genuine in Carlos's expression. "About 1,200. Carlos nodded slowly. "I might be able to help. My wife and we've been saving for a house. We've got some set aside. I could loan you 1,500 if you need it." "Carlos, I can't." "Hear me out. You pay me back $50 a paycheck, no interest. We've still got a year before we're ready to buy anyway, and you helped me out when my car died last winter, remember? You covered 2 of my shifts, so I didn't lose pay." Adrian did remember. Carlos's transmission had blown, and he'd been panicking about missing work. It hadn't been a big deal. Adrian had just rearranged the schedule. "That was nothing. It was something to me, and my wife thinks you're good people. She heard about the custody thing. Her cousin works in the courthouse, and she said anyone fighting that hard for their kid deserves a break." Adrian felt his throat tighten. "I'll pay you back every cent." "I know you will. That's why I'm offering." They shook on it, and Carlos said he'd have the money by Friday. Adrian wanted to argue more, wanted to insist he'd figure it out himself, but the relief was too overwhelming. He had a way forward now, a real one. That evening, he sat Sophie down at the kitchen table. She was working on a drawing of what looked like a dragon fighting a spaceship, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Hey, Soph, I need to talk to you about something." She put down her crayon. "Am I in trouble?" "No, nothing like that. I wanted to ask how you'd feel about seeing your mom more, like maybe 1 night a week in addition to weekends." Sophie's face scrunched up in thought. "Which night?" "Probably Wednesday. You'd have dinner there, do homework, and then she'd bring you home before bedtime." "Would I still see you the rest of the time?" "Yeah, every day except Wednesday evenings and your weekend with her." "Okay. I guess that's fine." She picked up her crayon again. "Can I bring Mr. Trunks to Mom's house?" "Of course." "Then it's okay." Adrian ruffled her hair. "Thanks, kiddo." "Dad, are you and Mom going to be friends again?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know, maybe not friends like we used to be, but we're trying to not fight anymore. Is that okay?" "I think so. Fighting makes my stomach hurt." "Mine too." On Friday, Carlos handed him an envelope with $1,500 in cash. "Don't lose this," he said. "My wife will kill me if you lose this." I'll guard it with my life. Adrian went straight from work to Rita's office, a cramped room above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemicals and old paper. He counted out the money, $4,050 exactly. And Rita counted it again, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Lease starts July 1st, she said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. Trash pickup is Tuesday and Friday. Laundry room's in the basement, quarters only. Any maintenance issues, you call me directly, not that handyman service I used to use because they're useless. Adrian signed everywhere she pointed. When it was done, she handed him 2 keys on a little ring. Welcome to the building, Mr. Cross. Don't make me regret this. I won't. He took Sophie to see the apartment that weekend. Her eyes went wide when she saw her bedroom. It was almost twice the size of her current one, with a window that looked out onto a small courtyard where some kids were playing. Is this really mine? She asked. Really yours. We can paint it whatever color you want. Can we do purple? With gold stars on the ceiling? We can definitely do that. Ew. She ran around the empty room, her footsteps echoing, already planning where her bed would go and which wall needed her bookshelf. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching her, and felt something close to hope. They moved in 2 weeks later. The process was chaotic. Adrian had accumulated more stuff than he'd realized in their 1-bedroom apartment. Jenna helped, along with Carlos and a couple other guys from work. Lillian showed up too, which surprised everyone. I wanted to help, she said, standing awkwardly in the doorway with a bag from Target. I brought cleaning supplies. Sophie ran over and hugged her. Mom, come see my room. Lillian let herself be dragged away, and Adrian heard their voices echoing from down the hall. When they came back, Lillian looked different, softer somehow. It's a good space, she said quietly. She'll be happy here. That's the plan. They worked in careful proximity for the rest of the afternoon, not quite together, but not avoiding each other either. It was strange, this new version of their relationship. Not married, not enemies, just 2 people trying to do right by the kid they'd made together. By evening, the apartment was mostly set up. The furniture was in place, boxes were stacked in corners to deal with later, and Sophie's room looked like an actual bedroom instead of an empty box. They ordered Chinese food and ate sitting on the living room floor because Adrian hadn't bought a dining table yet. I should go, Lillian said, gathering her trash. David's expecting me for dinner. Tell him thanks for the loan of his truck, Adrian said. David had let them use his pickup for the move, which had saved them a rental fee. I will. She kissed Sophie's head. I'll see you Wednesday, okay? Okay, Mom. After she left, Sophie leaned against Adrian's shoulder. This was a good day. Yeah, it really was. The first night in the new apartment was weird. The sounds were different pipes, different neighbors, different creaks and settles. Sophie appeared in Adrian's doorway around midnight, clutching Mr. Trunks. Can't sleep, she said. Me neither. Want to watch something? They ended up on the couch watching nature documentaries until they both dozed off. Adrian woke up at 3 a.m. with a crick in his neck and Sophie's foot in his face. He carried her to her room and tucked her in, then stood there for a moment looking around at the purple walls they'd painted together, the gold stars they'd stuck to the ceiling in what was probably not an astronomically accurate pattern. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. The 6-month review hearing was scheduled for late July. Marcus called to prep him the week before. The judge is going to want to see proof that you've met her conditions. Bring your lease, pay stubs from the new job, anything that demonstrates stability. I've got all of that. Good. And be prepared for Lillian's team to push on the visitation modification. If they're smart, they'll frame it as cooperative co-parenting rather than a power play. What do you think she's actually trying to do? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly? I think she's trying to be a better mom. Whether that's genuine or strategic, I can't tell you, but she's been consistent, and that counts for something. The hearing was less dramatic than the first one. Smaller room, fewer people, less tension. Judge Hernandez reviewed the documentation Adrian had brought. The lease, his employment letter, 6 months of pay stubs, Sophie's continued enrollment in school, and her improved grades. Mr. Cross, you've clearly made significant improvements to your living situation and employment stability. The 2-bedroom apartment is appropriate, your income has increased substantially, and all reports indicate that Sophie is thriving. Adrian let himself breathe. Ms. Voss, your attorney has requested a modification to the visitation schedule. 1 weeknight in addition to alternating weekends. Is that correct? Lillian stood. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. Yes, Your Honor. I've been working hard to reestablish my relationship with Sophie, and I believe more consistent contact would benefit both of us. Mr. Cross, do you have any objections to this modification? Adrian glanced at Marcus, who gave him a small nod. No objections, Your Honor. As long as it doesn't disrupt Sophie's school schedule or activities. We can work around her schedule, Lillian added quickly. Wednesday evenings, 5 to 8. I'll pick her up from after-school care and have her home in time for bed. Judge Hernandez made notes. I'm approving the modification on a trial basis. We'll review again in 3 months. If there are any issues, missed visits, scheduling conflicts, concerns about Sophie's well-being, either party can petition for another review. She looked at both of them over her reading glasses. I want to commend you both for putting aside your differences and focusing on what's best for your daughter. This is what co-parenting should look like. Keep it up. Walking out of the courthouse, Adrian felt lighter than he had in months. The custody arrangement was stable. Sophie was happy. He had a good job and a decent apartment. Things were actually working out. Lillian caught up with him in the parking lot. Adrian, wait. He turned. She looked like she was trying to find the right words. I wanted to say thank you for not fighting me on the extra night. I know you could have. Sophie wanted it. That's what matters. Still, I appreciate it. She hesitated. And I wanted to apologize for how I handled things before. The custody petition, the lawyers, trying to make you look bad. That wasn't fair. No, it wasn't. I was angry. At you, at myself, at how everything fell apart. And I took it out on you when you were just trying to take care of our daughter. Adrian studied her face, looking for manipulation or ulterior motives, but all he saw was genuine regret. We both made mistakes, he said finally. The marriage, the divorce, all of it. But we've got a chance to do better now, for Sophie. Yeah, we do. She started to walk away, then turned back. You know, you're a better parent than I gave you credit for. Sophie's lucky to have you. She's lucky to have both of us. When we're actually trying. Lillian smiled, a real smile, not the polished one she used for work. Yeah, she is. The rest of summer passed in a blur of routine. Adrian worked his shifts, came home to Sophie, helped with homework, made dinners that were sometimes successful and sometimes disasters. Wednesday nights, Lillian picked Sophie up and brought her back, smelling like expensive soap, and with stories about David's house and the pool and what they'd made for dinner. Mom's getting better at cooking, Sophie reported one week. The pasta wasn't burnt this time. That's progress. And she asked me about my friends. Like, actually asked and listened. It was nice. Adrian was surprised by how little jealousy he felt. Maybe because Sophie was happier, or maybe because he was finally secure enough in his role that Lillian's involvement didn't feel like a threat. In August, Sophie started 2nd grade. Adrian took her shopping for school supplies, and she picked out a backpack covered in dinosaurs wearing sunglasses. Her teacher was a young guy named Mr. Rodriguez who seemed enthusiastic about everything, including the fact that Sophie could already read at a 4th grade level. She's going to do great this year, Mr. Rodriguez said at the open house. I can already tell. Sophie made friends quickly. She always had. There was a girl named Maya who liked the same books she did, and a boy named Josh who was apparently hilarious at recess. She came home every day with stories that tumbled out in an excited rush, barely pausing for breath. Work was going well, too. Adrian's team had the best efficiency numbers in the warehouse, and Mendez had started pulling him into management meetings. There was talk of another promotion down the line, maybe to assistant regional manager, though nothing was official yet. In September, Carlos pulled him aside after a shift. Hey, you've been paying me back $50 every 2 weeks like clockwork. You're down to your last 3 payments. I told you I would. I know. I just wanted to say thanks for being solid about it. Some people, you lend them money and suddenly they're avoiding you in the break room. That's not me. I know. That's why when you need something again, you come to me first, okay? Adrian clapped him on the shoulder. Okay. That evening, he and Sophie were making tacos, her new favorite food, though she insisted on putting pineapple on hers, which Adrian found disturbing but allowed, when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Cross? This is Patricia Morrison, The psychologist who evaluated Sophie for your custody case. Adrian's stomach tightened. I remember. I'm calling because I wanted to apologize. I reviewed my notes from Sophie's sessions, and I realize now that I didn't give proper weight to her stated preferences. I let my professional assumptions override what she was actually telling me. Adrian didn't know what to say. I've been doing this work for a long time, Dr. Morrison continued. And sometimes I forget that children often know what they need better than we give them credit for. Sophie was clear about wanting to stay with you, and I dismissed that as emotional attachment to familiarity. But seeing how well she's doing now, I realized she was right. You're a good father, Mr. Cross. I should have said that in court. Thank you, Adrian managed. That means a lot. I'm glad things worked out. And I'm sorry I made it harder than it needed to be. After they hung up, Adrian stood there for a moment, phone in hand, trying to process the conversation. An apology from an expert who'd almost cost him everything. It didn't change what had happened, but it felt like some small piece of justice. Dad, the shells are burning, Sophie called from the kitchen. He rushed back to rescue dinner, and the moment passed. October brought cooler weather and Halloween planning. Sophie wanted to be a scientist this year, specifically a paleontologist, complete with khaki vest and magnifying glass. Adrian helped her put together a costume from thrift store finds, and on Halloween night, they went trick-or-treating with a group from her class. Lillian had asked to take Sophie for Halloween, but Sophie had said she wanted to do it with both of them, so they'd awkwardly agreed to meet at the school and go around the neighborhood together. David came too, which made things even weirder, but he was actually decent. He talked to Adrian about sports and didn't try too hard to be Sophie's buddy. She talks about you a lot, David said while the kids were running ahead to the next house. At our place. Always Dad says this or Dad does it this way. You're the standard she measures everything against. That's a lot of pressure. Yeah, but you're handling it. They watched Sophie and her friends comparing candy hauls under a streetlight, their laughter carrying in the cool air. Lillian's trying, you know, David added. She really is. This whole thing shook her, made her realize she was about to lose something she can't replace. I know she's trying. I can see it. Good, because for what it's worth, I think you're both doing a good job now. Better than most divorced couples I know. It was strange getting validation from his ex-wife's new husband, but Adrian found he appreciated it. By November, life had settled into something that almost felt normal. Work, school, homework, dinner, bedtime. Wednesday nights when Sophie was with Lillian, Adrian did laundry and meal prep, and sometimes just sat in the quiet apartment reading. Weekends were for errands and library trips, and whatever adventure Sophie had decided they needed to go on. Marcus called in mid-November with news. Lillian's lawyer reached out. They're withdrawing the custody modification petition officially. It's done, Adrian. You won. Won. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like everyone had just finally stopped fighting long enough to realize what mattered. That's good, Adrian said. Thanks for letting me know. You going to celebrate? Maybe get Sophie some ice cream after school. Marcus laughed. Sounds about right. That evening, Adrian took Sophie to their favorite ice cream place. She got her usual, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. And he got vanilla, which she said was boring but secretly liked to steal bites of. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? Like, with how things are now? He thought about it. The apartment that was small but theirs. The job that was stable and respected his time. Sophie thriving in school, making friends, laughing more. Lillian actually showing up, actually trying. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was perfect. But it was good. Yeah, Soph, I'm happy. Are you? Yeah, I like having both you and Mom. And I like Mr. Rodriguez. And I like that we have more space now. And I like that you don't look worried all the time anymore. I looked worried? Before. Like you were always thinking about scary stuff. But you don't do that as much now. Adrian pulled her into a hug, ice cream and all. I'm not worried anymore. I've got you. I've got a good job. I've got a good apartment. What do I have to worry about? The zombie apocalypse, Sophie said seriously. Okay, that's fair. That's definitely concerning. She giggled, and he thought about how close he'd come to losing this. The sound of her laugh, the weight of her leaning against him, the simple comfort of being her dad. All of it had been on the line, and he'd fought for it with everything he had. And he'd won. Not in court exactly, but in the ways that mattered. December came with the first snow. Sophie shrieked with joy and insisted on building a snowman in the courtyard, even though there was barely enough snow to make one sad lump. They gave it stick arms and a carrot nose and took pictures that Adrian sent to Lillian. She texted back, "That's the ugliest snowman I've ever seen. I love it." Christmas was split between both houses. Sophie spent Christmas Eve with Adrian, their tradition of pizza and bad holiday movies, and Christmas morning with Lillian and David. She came back in the afternoon with presents from both households and stories about David's family being loud but nice. "Did you have fun?" Adrian asked. "Yeah, but I missed you." "I missed you too, but I'm glad you got to have Christmas with your mom." On New Year's Eve, after Sophie was asleep, Adrian sat on his couch looking at the past year. The courtroom battles, the promotions, the apartment hunt, the gradual peace with Lillian. All of it had felt impossible at the time, but he'd done it. One day at a time, one decision at a time, he'd built something stable. His phone buzzed. A text from Lillian. "Happy New Year. Thanks for sharing her with me." He texted back, "Happy New Year. Thanks for showing up." It wasn't friendship exactly. Maybe it never would be. But it was something better than the alternative. It was two people who'd failed at being married but were learning to succeed at being parents. Adrian fell asleep on the couch that night, the TV playing some countdown he wasn't watching. And for the first time in years, he didn't dream about courtrooms or judges or losing Sophie. He just slept, peaceful and dreamless, while snow fell softly outside and the new year crept in quiet and hopeful. January brought a cold snap that made the apartment's old heating system work overtime. Adrian kept finding Sophie curled up on the couch under 3 blankets, doing her homework with mittens on. "We look like we're camping," she said when he asked if she was warm enough. "Indoor camping, the best kind." He called Rita about the heating, and she showed up the next day with a space heater and a guy who banged on the radiators for 20 minutes before declaring them fixed enough. The apartment got warmer, but not by much. Adrian bought Sophie a thick comforter with planets on it, and she declared herself perfectly toasty. Work had gotten more complicated. The assistant regional manager position that Mendez had mentioned was now officially open, and Adrian was one of 3 candidates being considered. The promotion would mean another significant pay increase and better benefits, but it also meant more responsibility and occasional travel. "You'd be overseeing operations across 4 warehouses," Mendez explained during Adrian's interview. "It's a big step up. You'd have managers reporting to you, not just floor workers. Think you can handle it?" "I can handle it." "What about your daughter? The travel component might be tough with shared custody." Adrian had already thought about this. "My ex-wife has been consistent with her schedule. If I need to be out of town, she can adjust her days. We've gotten better at working together." Mendez nodded, making notes. "We'll let you know in a few weeks, but between you and me, you're the front runner." Adrian left the interview feeling cautiously optimistic. The extra money would mean he could finally start that college fund for Sophie. Maybe even take her on a real vacation, not just weekend trips to visit free museums, but somewhere with a beach or mountains or whatever 8-year-olds dreamed about. But first he'd have to talk to Lillian about the travel schedule, and that conversation felt like stepping into a minefield. He waited until their next coffee meetup. They'd started doing this once a month, just to check in about Sophie, without lawyers present. Lillian showed up looking tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that was very unlike her usual polished appearance. "Rough week?" Adrian asked. "David's mother is visiting. She has opinions about everything from how I decorate to how I parent to what I serve for dinner. It's exhausting." "Sorry. Not your problem." She took a long drink of her latte. "What did you want to talk about?" "There's a promotion opportunity at work. Assistant regional manager. It's a good move, but it would require some overnight travel. Maybe 1 or 2 nights a month." Lillian's expression shifted to something guarded. "How much travel?" "They haven't given me specifics yet, but I wanted to make sure we could work around it before I accepted. I'd need you to be flexible on some of the custody days." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her drink. "This is important to you?" "It's important for Sophie. The salary increase would be significant. I could do more for her." "You're already doing enough." The comment surprised him. "What?" "You're already doing enough, Adrian. You don't have to keep proving yourself." "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to build a better life for our daughter." Lillian set down her cup. "I know. And yes, we can work around your travel schedule. Just give me as much notice as possible, okay? David travels too, so coordinating might get complicated, but we'll figure it out." Thank you. But I want to ask for something in return. Here it was, the catch. What? Sophie's birthday is in March. I want to throw her a party at our house. A real one, with her friends from school, and a cake and all of it. And I want you to come. Adrian blinked. You want me to come to a party at your house? I want Sophie to have a birthday where both her parents are present and not glaring at each other across a room. I want her to have one day where we're all just celebrating her. Can you do that? He thought about it. The idea of spending hours at Lillian and David's house, making small talk with David's family and Lillian's work friends, felt uncomfortable. But Sophie's face when she blew out her candles with both her parents watching, that felt worth it. Yeah, I can do that. Lillian smiled, and it looked relieved. Good. Because I already told her we were planning it together, and she's been talking about it nonstop for 3 days. You told her before asking me. I was pretty sure you'd say yes. You're predictable that way. Predictable how? You always choose her, even when it's hard for you. Adrian didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded and drank his coffee. The promotion came through in February. Adrian signed the paperwork in Mendez's office, shook hands with the regional director, and walked out with a title that felt simultaneously earned and surreal. Assistant Regional Manager. He'd gone from a guy who could barely make rent to someone managing a quarter of the company's operations. His first trip was scheduled for late February, 2 days in Columbus, Ohio, visiting one of their distribution centers that was having efficiency problems. Adrian had never been to Ohio. He'd barely been outside his home state except for that one disastrous road trip with Lillian early in their marriage when their car had broken down in Nevada and they'd fought the entire way home. You're going on a plane? Sophie asked when he told her about the trip. Just a short flight. I'll leave Tuesday morning and be back Wednesday night. Can I come? Not this time, but you'll stay with your mom and I'll call you before bed both nights. Will you bring me a souvenir? Absolutely. What do you want? She thought about it seriously. A rock from Ohio, so I can add it to my collection. Sophie had started collecting rocks over the summer. Nothing valuable, just interesting stones she found on the ground. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed, each one labeled with where she'd found it. One Ohio rock coming up. The trip itself was uneventful. The distribution center's problems were mostly communication-related, easily fixed with better protocols and some staff training. Adrian spent his evenings in a hotel room that smelled like industrial cleaning products, video calling Sophie and telling her about the weird restaurant he'd found that served breakfast all day. Did you get my rock? She asked during the second call. I did. It's a good one. Very Ohio-ish. What does that mean? You'll see when I get home. He'd actually picked up 3 rocks from outside the hotel, wanting to make sure at least one of them was impressive enough. The third one had an interesting stripe pattern, so he put that in his bag and tossed the others. When he got home Wednesday night, Sophie was waiting at the door even though it was past her bedtime. Lillian stood behind her, looking amused. She refused to sleep until you got back, Lillian said. Dad, show me the rock. Adrian pulled it out of his bag with ceremonial seriousness. Sophie examined it like it was a rare gem, turning it over in her hands. It's perfect, she declared. I'm going to put it in the special section. There was apparently a hierarchy to her rock collection. Adrian had learned not to ask too many questions about it. After Sophie went to bed, Lillian lingered by the door. How was the trip? Good, productive. The team there was receptive to changes. That's great. She hesitated. David and I have been talking about kids, about having one of our own. Adrian felt something tighten in his chest, though he wasn't sure why. Okay? I wanted you to hear it from me, not from Sophie after she overhears something. We're going to start trying soon. Congratulations. I know it's weird, us talking about this. Everything about our situation is weird, Lillian. This is just one more thing. She laughed, but it sounded sad. You ever think about what would have happened if we'd made different choices? Back when things started going wrong? Sometimes. But I don't know if different choices would have fixed it. We wanted different things. We always did. Yeah. She pulled her jacket tighter. I should go, but thank you for being decent about all of this. You can make things a lot harder, and you don't. Same to you. After she left, Adrian sat on the couch in the quiet apartment. The idea of Lillian having another kid felt strange, like proof that they'd really moved on from each other, built separate lives. He should be happy for her. He mostly was, but there was also this small, petty part of him that wondered if a new baby would mean she'd have less time for Sophie. He pushed the thought away. That was borrowing trouble from a future that hadn't happened yet. March arrived with a kind of weather that couldn't decide if it was winter or spring. Sophie's birthday party was scheduled for the second Saturday of the month, and Lillian had gone all out. She'd rented a bounce house, hired a face painter, and ordered a cake shaped like a stack of books because Sophie had recently declared she wanted to be a librarian when she grew up. Last week she wanted to be a paleontologist, Adrian had reminded her. Kids change their minds. We're celebrating all her potential careers. The party was held at Lillian and David's house, and Adrian arrived early to help set up. David answered the door in jeans and an old college t-shirt, looking more relaxed than Adrian had ever seen him. Thanks for coming early, David said. Lillian's been running around like a tornado all morning. I think she might be having a small breakdown about whether we ordered enough pizza. We definitely ordered enough pizza, Lillian called from somewhere in the house. Adrian helped David set up tables in the backyard while Lillian arranged decorations inside. It was surreal, this domestic cooperation. A year ago, they'd all been in a courtroom fighting. Now they were hanging streamers and arguing about whether the bounce house was inflated enough. Sophie arrived with a group of her friends from school, and the party erupted into chaos. Kids running everywhere, shrieking with laughter, their faces getting painted with butterflies and superheroes. Sophie was in the center of it all, grinning so wide Adrian thought her face might split. She's having the best time, Lillian said, coming to stand next to him by the drinks table. Yeah, you did good. We did good. This was a team effort. They watched Sophie chase Maya through the bounce house, both of them laughing so hard they could barely bounce. I have something to tell you, Lillian said quietly. I'm pregnant. Adrian's hand tightened on his cup. Already? I thought you just started trying. Apparently we're more efficient than expected. She looked nervous. David doesn't know yet. I just found out this morning. But I wanted you to know before I told Sophie. When are you going to tell her? Not today. This is her day. Maybe next week when we can sit down and really talk about what it means. She's going to have questions. I know. And I'm terrified I'll give her the wrong answers. Adrian looked at Lillian, really looked at her, and saw the same fear he'd felt 1,000 times. The fear of screwing up, of not being enough, of letting down the small person who trusted you completely. You'll figure it out, he said. You're better at this than you used to be. So are you. They stood there in companionable silence, watching their daughter be 8 years old and perfect and happy. Whatever complicated history existed between them, whatever resentment or regret still lingered, none of it mattered in this moment. They'd made this kid together, and she was thriving, and that was enough. The party wound down around 4. Parents came to collect their sugar-crashed children, and Sophie opened presents surrounded by wrapping paper chaos. She got books and art supplies and a robot kit that she immediately wanted to build. Can Dad help me? She asked Lillian. If he wants to. Adrian ended up staying for dinner, helping Sophie with the robot at the kitchen table while Lillian and David cleaned up the party debris. It felt oddly normal, this blended family moment. Strange, but not bad. This has been the best birthday ever, Sophie announced, her robot half assembled in front of her. Both my parents were here and nobody fought, and I got a bounce house. The bar for best birthday is apparently pretty low, David joked from the kitchen. Nope. This is it. Peak birthday. Nothing will ever be better. Adrian caught Lillian's eye across the room, and they shared a smile. They'd done this right. Finally, after all the mistakes and battles and hurt feelings, they'd gotten something right. He left around 8 after Sophie had started yawning between robot instructions. She hugged him at the door, still wearing her birthday crown. Love you, Dad. Love you too, birthday girl. Driving home, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, genuine contentment. Not just surviving, not just getting by, but actually content with how things were. His job was good. Sophie was happy. His relationship with Lillian had evolved into something functional and occasionally even pleasant. The phone call came 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening, while Adrian was making dinner. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Is this Adrian Cross? Speaking. This is Catherine Wells from the Department of Child and Family Services. I'm calling regarding a report filed concerning your daughter, Sophie Cross. Adrian's stomach dropped. What kind of report? An anonymous complaint was filed alleging inadequate supervision and unsafe living conditions. We're required to investigate all reports. I'd like to schedule a home visit for later this week. This is insane. Who filed it? Reports can be made anonymously, Mr. Cross. The identity of the reporter is confidential. My daughter is fine. She's happy and healthy and well cared for. I'm sure that's true. This is just protocol. How does Thursday at 2 o'clock work for you? Adrian forced himself to breathe. Fine. Thursday at 2. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I'll see you then. After hanging up, Adrian immediately called Marcus, his hands shaking with anger and fear. Someone reported you to CPS? Marcus asked, his voice sharp with concern. Anonymous report. They're doing a home visit Thursday. Okay, don't panic. These investigations happen all the time, and most of them are closed quickly when they find nothing wrong. Make sure your apartment is clean, have documentation ready, Sophie's school records, medical records, anything that shows she's well cared for. Who would do this? Could be anyone. A neighbor who heard arguing, someone who saw something they misinterpreted, or what? Or someone trying to mess with your custody arrangement. The implication hung in the air. Lillian. But she'd been so cooperative lately, so invested in making things work. Would she really sabotage him now? I need to find out who filed this. You can't. Those reports are protected. Focus on the investigation. Prove that Sophie's fine and this goes away. After they hung up, Adrian paced his apartment, rage and fear fighting for dominance. He'd worked so hard. He'd done everything right, and now someone was trying to take it all away with an anonymous phone call. His phone rang again. Lillian. Did you do this? He demanded before she could speak. Did I do what? Did you call CPS on me? What? No, Adrian, what are you talking about? He told her about the call, about the investigation, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I swear to you that wasn't me, Lillian said. I wouldn't do that, not now, not after everything. Then who? I don't know, but I'll help you figure it out. What do you need? I need to know who's trying to destroy me. We'll find out, I promise. Thursday arrived too quickly. Adrian had cleaned the apartment until it gleamed, organized all of Sophie's records into a neat folder, and prepared himself to be judged by a stranger who'd already been told he was failing his daughter. Catherine Wells arrived exactly at 2. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, with a clipboard and an expression that gave away nothing. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Cross. I know these situations can be stressful. My daughter is at school. I didn't want her here for this. That's fine. I'll need to speak with her separately anyway, probably at her school. Catherine looked around the apartment, making notes. Can you show me Sophie's room? Adrian led her through the apartment, watching her examine everything. Sophie's bedroom with its purple walls and organized bookshelf. The kitchen with its stocked pantry and clean dishes. The bathroom with Sophie's toothbrush and step stool. The report mentioned inadequate supervision, Catherine said. Can you walk me through Sophie's typical day? Adrian explained his work schedule, Lillian's custody time, the backup care arrangements with Jenna when needed. Catherine took notes without comment. And the living conditions complaint? I don't know what that's about. As you can see, the apartment is clean and safe. Sophie has her own room. We have heat and hot water. There's plenty of food. Catherine nodded, still writing. I'll need to speak with Sophie's school, her doctor, and conduct a brief interview with Sophie herself. After that, I'll make my recommendation. How long does this take? Usually 2 to 3 weeks for a complete investigation. You'll receive a letter with the findings. After she left, Adrian sat on his couch with his head in his hands. 3 weeks of wondering, waiting, worrying that someone's lies would be believed over his truth. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You don't deserve her. You never did. Adrian stared at the message, ice spreading through his veins. Someone was actively trying to take Sophie away. Someone who knew him, who had his number, who wanted him to suffer. He forwarded the text to Marcus immediately, then called Lillian. I just got a threatening text. I think whoever filed the CPS report is trying to intimidate me. Forward it to me. I'm going to talk to David. He knows people who can trace these things. This is getting out of hand. I know, but we're going to handle it together. That word, together, should have felt strange coming from her. Instead, it felt like the only solid thing in a world that was tilting sideways. Over the next week, Adrian existed in a state of constant anxiety. He went to work, picked up Sophie, made dinner, helped with homework, all while feeling like everything could fall apart at any moment. Sophie noticed. "Dad, are you okay? You seem sad." "I'm fine, baby. Just work stuff." "Is it because of that lady who came to visit? The one you told me about?" He'd explained the CPS visit to Sophie in the simplest terms, that someone had questions about how she was being cared for, and a nice lady needed to check that everything was okay. "Yeah, but it'll be fine. She's just making sure you're happy and safe." "I am happy and safe. I'll tell her." "I know you will." Catherine Wells did interview Sophie at school, with a counselor present. She also spoke to Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's doctor, and apparently several of Adrian's neighbors. Adrian felt like his entire life was being examined under a microscope, every choice scrutinized and judged. The letter arrived on a Friday afternoon. Adrian stood in his apartment holding the envelope, too afraid to open it. If they'd found reason to remove Sophie, if someone's lies had been convincing enough, he tore it open. After thorough investigation, this office finds no evidence of neglect, abuse, or inadequate supervision. The complaint has been determined to be unfounded. Case closed. Adrian read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Case closed. Sophie was safe. They'd found nothing wrong because there was nothing wrong. He called Lillian immediately. They closed the case. Unfounded complaint. Thank God. I've been checking my phone every 5 minutes waiting to hear. Now we find out who did this. Actually, David already did. He had a friend trace the text message. Adrian, it was Gregory Whitmore. Your lawyer? Why would he? Former lawyer. I fired him 3 months ago when I decided not to pursue the custody modification. Apparently, he didn't take it well. David's friend found emails between Whitmore and a private investigator he hired to dig up dirt on you. When they didn't find anything, he filed the false CPS report himself. Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. Can we prove it? David's friend is very good at what he does. We have documentation, phone records, everything. I've already contacted my new attorney. We're filing a complaint with the state bar and considering a lawsuit for harassment. I want to press charges. We can do that too. Adrian sat down heavily on his couch. All of this. The investigation, the fear, the threatening text, because a lawyer was angry about losing a client. I'm sorry, Lillian said quietly. I brought him into our lives. This is my fault. It's his fault, not yours. Still, I should have vetted him better. I should have... Lillian, stop. We handle it now, okay? Together. There was that word again, together. Somehow, through all the chaos and pain and mistakes, they'd ended up on the same side. Okay, she said, together. The complaint against Gregory Whitmore moved through the State Bar Association with surprising speed. Lillian's new attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Osman, who looked like she could argue circles around anyone, had compiled a file thick enough to use as a weapon. False CPS reports, harassment, attempted witness intimidation. The list went on. He's going to be disbarred, Rachel told them during a meeting at her office. The evidence is overwhelming, and the criminal charges for filing a false report will probably stick too. Adrian sat across from her, Lillian beside him. It still felt strange, sitting next to his ex-wife like they were a united front, but that's what they'd become. How long until it's resolved? Adrian asked. The bar complaint, probably 6 months. The criminal case could take longer. But the important thing is that he can't practice law while it's pending. He's been suspended. Good, Lillian said, her voice hard. He tried to destroy Adrian's life out of spite. He deserves worse than suspension. After the meeting, they walked out to the parking lot together. March had finally decided to commit to spring, and the air smelled like rain and new leaves. You want to get coffee? Lillian asked. We should probably talk about telling Sophie about the baby. Yeah, okay. They ended up at the same coffee shop where they'd had so many awkward conversations over the past year. This time felt different, though. Less hostile, more like 2 people who'd survived a war together and were trying to figure out peacetime. I'm 12 weeks along, Lillian said, stirring her decaf latte. We did the ultrasound yesterday. Everything looks healthy. That's great. Congratulations. David wants to tell Sophie soon. He's worried she'll hear it from someone else. She's going to have questions about what this means for her, for your time with her. I know. Lillian looked tired. I keep thinking about how I handled things before, when I was trying to take custody. I was so focused on what I could give her that I forgot she already had what she needed. You were scared. People do stupid things when they're scared. I did a lot of stupid things, not just with the custody case, with our marriage, with how I treated you after the divorce. I made you into the enemy when you were just trying to survive. Adrian took a drink of his coffee, buying time to think. We both made mistakes. I wasn't easy to be married to either. I was so focused on being right that I stopped listening to what you needed. We were young and dumb. We were definitely that. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with afternoon activity. Students on laptops, business meetings, first dates, regular life happening while they tried to navigate their irregular situation. I think we should tell Sophie together, Lillian said. At your place, so she feels safe and comfortable. I'll bring David, and we can all sit down and explain it. When? This weekend? Saturday afternoon? Adrian nodded. I'll make sure we have her favorite snacks. Sugar helps difficult conversations. Lillian laughed, and it sounded genuine. That's your parenting philosophy? Sugar helps? Sugar helps everything. It's science. Saturday came with unseasonably warm weather. Sophie was in the backyard with some neighborhood kids, playing an elaborate game that seemed to involve a lot of shrieking and running in circles. Adrian watched from the kitchen window while setting out cookies and juice boxes like he was preparing for a business negotiation. Lillian and David arrived at 3. David looked nervous, his hands shoved in his pockets, his smile too bright. Hey, Sophie, he called out the back door. Can you come inside for a minute? We want to talk to you about something. Sophie came running, her cheeks flushed from playing. Am I in trouble? No trouble, Adrian said. Just some news. Good news. They all sat in the living room, Sophie on the couch between Adrian and Lillian, David in the armchair looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. So, Lillian began, then stopped, started again. You know how families come in different shapes and sizes? Sophie nodded slowly, her expression wary. Well, our family is about to get bigger. David and I are going to have a baby. You're going to have a brother or sister. Sophie's eyes went wide. She looked at Adrian, then back at Lillian. A real baby? A real baby, due in September. Will the baby live at your house? Yes, with me and David. Will I still live with Dad? Adrian put his arm around her. Nothing changes with where you live. You're still here with me most of the time and with your mom on her days. The baby doesn't change any of that. Sophie thought about this, her face serious. Will you still have time for me when the baby comes? Lillian's voice cracked slightly. Always. You're my first baby. Nothing will ever change that. Can I help take care of it? Absolutely. You'll be the best big sister. Sophie seemed to relax a little. Okay, can I go tell Maya? She's going to flip out. Sure, Adrian said, and she was off the couch and out the door before any of them could say anything else. David let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. She's resilient, Adrian said. Kids are better at adapting than we give them credit for. After Lillian and David left, Adrian found Sophie in the backyard, explaining the baby news to Maya with wild hand gestures. And it's going to be tiny, like really tiny, and I'll have to teach it everything because babies don't know anything. That's a big responsibility, Maya said seriously. I know, but I'm 8, so I'm basically an expert at life. Adrian smiled, 8 years old and already convinced she had the world figured out. He remembered feeling that way once, before life taught him how little anyone actually knew. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Adrian sat on his couch with a beer and his phone. He scrolled through old photos. Sophie as a baby, the 3 of them when they'd still been a family, Lillian laughing at something he'd said. It felt like looking at different people, a different life. His phone rang. Marcus. Good news. Whitmore's been formally disbarred. The decision came through today. He can petition for reinstatement in 5 years, but given the severity of the violations, it's unlikely to be approved. What about the criminal charges? He took a plea deal, 1 year probation, community service, and he has to pay restitution for the cost of the CPS investigation. It's not jail time, but it's on his record. His reputation is destroyed. Adrian should have felt satisfaction. This was justice, consequences for someone who tried to ruin him. But mostly, he just felt tired. Thanks for handling it, Marcus. Of course. And Adrian, you've come a long way from that first hearing. The guy I met then was barely holding on. Now you're managing regional operations and co-parenting successfully. You should be proud. After hanging up, Adrian thought about that. Proud. It wasn't a feeling he'd allowed himself much. There was always the next problem, the next crisis, the next thing to survive. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe he should take a moment to recognize how far he'd come. April brought warmer weather in Sophie's spring soccer season. She was terrible at soccer, spent most of each game picking dandelions or talking to the other team's players, but she loved it anyway. Both Adrian and Lillian came to games sitting on opposite sides of the field at first, then gradually migrating closer until they were sharing the same blanket and offering each other snacks. She just scored on her own goal, Lillian said, wincing. That's the third time this season. Should we be concerned? That she's not competitive enough? No, I think we dodged a bullet there. They watched Sophie celebrate her accidental goal by doing a cartwheel, completely unbothered by which net the ball had gone into. She's happy, Lillian said softly. That's all that matters. Yeah. David joined them for the second half, bringing water bottles and oranges. He'd started showing up to things more. School events, birthday parties, random weeknight dinners. He was trying, and Sophie seemed to like him. That was enough. Lillian's showing now, David said, gesturing to where Lillian's shirt was starting to stretch over a small bump. People at work keep asking when she's due, and she gets all embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. I just don't like discussing my reproductive status with the IT department. Adrian laughed. It was getting easier, this casual friendship with them. Easier to see Lillian happy with someone else. Easier to watch David be a part of Sophie's life. May came with end-of-school year chaos. Projects due, field trips, final tests. Sophie was being moved to the gifted program for third grade, which meant more homework, but also more challenge. She was excited about it in the way kids get excited about things they don't fully understand yet. Mrs. Patterson says I'm reading at a 5th grade level, she told Adrian proudly. She says I might be ready for middle school books soon. That's amazing, Soph. You've been working really hard. Will you still help me with homework when it gets harder? Always. Even when you're smarter than me, which will probably be next year, she giggled. You're pretty smart, Dad, for an old person. I'm 34. Like I said, old. The assistant regional manager job had settled into a routine. Adrian traveled once or twice a month, managing teams across multiple facilities. He was good at it. The people management part, the problem solving, the ability to see patterns others missed. Mendez had hinted at future opportunities, maybe even a director position down the line. The money helped too. Adrian had started a college fund for Sophie, contributed regularly to his retirement account, and even had an emergency savings that actually counted as savings instead of money he hadn't needed to spend yet. Financial stability felt strange after so many years of scrambling. In June, Lillian called with news. We found out the sex. It's a girl. Another one? David's going to be outnumbered. He's terrified, but also excited. We're thinking about names. I wanted to run something by you first. Why do you need my approval for your kid's name? Because Sophie's going to have an opinion, and I want to make sure you're okay with it too. We're thinking about naming her Rose. Rose Elizabeth Hartwell. Adrian thought about it. Rose. It was pretty, classic, nothing that would make Sophie feel replaced or less important. I think it's a good name. Yeah? Yeah, Rose Cross Hartwell sounds like a lawyer or a detective. She'll be unstoppable. Lillian laughed. I hadn't thought about the hyphenation. That's a mouthful. Sophie will love it. She's been making lists of possible names. Rose was on there. Really? She takes this big sister thing seriously. There was a pause, and then Lillian said, Thank you, Adrian, for being okay with all of this, for not making it weird or difficult. We're family. Weird, broken, reassembled family, but family. Yeah, we are. Summer arrived with heat and humidity. Sophie went to day camp while Adrian worked, learning archery and canoeing and coming home covered in bug bites and stories. Lillian's pregnancy progressed. She was in her 3rd trimester now, moving slower, complaining about her feet. David was in full panic mode about becoming a father, which Sophie found hilarious. He asked me what babies eat, she told Adrian over dinner one night. I said milk, and then he wanted to know what kind of milk, and I said mom milk, and he got all red in the face. That sounds about right. Adults are weird about babies. We really are. In late August, a week before Sophie's third grade started, Adrian got called into the regional director's office. He'd been expecting a routine check-in, maybe some updates on quarterly numbers. Instead, he found Mendez and the director of operations both waiting. Sit down, Adrian, the director said. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she'd been with the company for 20 years. We want to talk to you about your future here. Adrian sat, trying to read their expressions. You've exceeded expectations in the assistant regional manager role, Patricia continued. Your facilities have the highest efficiency ratings in the region, staff retention is up, and you've implemented several process improvements that we're rolling out company-wide. Thank you. We're creating a new position, Director of Regional Operations. It would oversee all warehouse and distribution operations across the Eastern Seaboard. It's a significant step up, more responsibility, more travel, and a salary in the low six figures. Adrian's brain stuttered. 6 figures. That was the kind of money he'd never imagined making. We want you for the position, Mendez added. But we need to know you can handle the travel component. It would be roughly 1 week per month on the road, sometimes more during busy seasons. I'd need to discuss it with my daughter's mother, make sure we can coordinate schedules. Of course, take the weekend, talk it over, and let us know Monday. Adrian left the meeting in a daze. Director of Regional Operations, a title that sounded important because it was important. The kind of opportunity that changed lives. He called Lillian immediately. They offered me a director position, 6-figure salary, but it requires travel about a week per month. That's amazing, Adrian. Congratulations. Can we make it work? With Sophie and the baby coming? There was a pause while she thought. Yes, we can make it work. David's company is letting him cut back on travel once Rose is born. Between the two of us, we can cover whatever you need. You're sure? I'm sure. Take the job. You've earned it. That night, Adrian told Sophie about the potential new position. You'd be gone more? She asked, her face falling. About a week each month. But I'd still be here for most things. And I'd call you every night, and we'd make the time we have together count extra. Would you be happy with the new job? The question surprised him. Yeah, I think I would. Then you should do it, but you have to promise to bring me back cool rocks from wherever you go. Deal. On Monday, Adrian accepted the position. The promotion was announced company-wide, and his phone filled with congratulatory messages from coworkers. Carlos sent a text that just said, "Hell yes," followed by 5 fire emojis. Rose was born on September 15th, 3 days before Sophie's school fall festival. Lillian went into labor at 4 in the morning, and David called Adrian at 6, his voice shaking with excitement and terror. She's here, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, everyone's healthy. That's great, David, congratulations. Sophie can visit this afternoon if you want to bring her. Adrian took Sophie to the hospital after school. She was nervous, clutching a stuffed bunny she'd bought with her allowance. What if she doesn't like me? Sophie whispered in the elevator. Babies don't work like that. She's going to love you. You're her big sister. In the hospital room, Lillian looked exhausted and radiant at the same time. David was holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink, his face transformed with wonder. And when Sophie approached, when she got her first look at her baby sister, her entire expression softened. She's so small, Sophie breathed. You were this small once, Adrian said. Can I hold her? Lillian nodded, and David carefully transferred Rose into Sophie's arms. Adrian's heart did something complicated watching his daughter hold her sister, watching this new family configuration exist in the same space. Hi, Rose, Sophie whispered. I'm Sophie. I'm going to teach you everything. Rose yawned, completely unimpressed, and Sophie laughed. They stayed for an hour, taking turns holding the baby, listening to Lillian and David's birth story. When it was time to leave, Sophie kissed Rose's forehead gently. I'll see you soon, little sister. In the car on the way home, Sophie was quiet. You okay? Adrian asked. Yeah, I was worried I'd be jealous, but I'm not. I'm just happy. Is that weird? Not weird at all. That's exactly what you should feel. We're a family, a weird one, but a family. The weirdest, Adrian agreed. Fall settled in with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. Adrian's new position started in October, and his first trip was to Boston to tour a new distribution facility. He brought Sophie back a Red Sox keychain and a rock from near Fenway Park. "This is the best rock yet," she declared, adding it to her collection. Sophie split her time between both households now, comfortable in both spaces. She had clothes at Lillian's house, a space in Rose's nursery for when she stayed over, and had started calling David by his first name instead of my mom's husband. The holidays approached. Thanksgiving was split. Sophie spent the day with Adrian and his coworkers who'd become like family, then had dessert at Lillian's with David's extended family. Christmas was similarly divided but without the tension of previous years. On Christmas Eve, after Sophie was asleep, Adrian sat on his couch thinking about the past 2 years. The custody battle, the apartment hunt, the promotion, Whitmore's attack, and now this strange peace they'd all found together. His phone buzzed, a text from Lillian. "Thank you for sharing her with us today. Rose's first Christmas was better with Sophie here." He texted back, "She's happy, that's all that matters." "You did that. You fought for her when I was trying to take her away. You gave her stability when I was creating chaos. She's happy because of you." Adrian stared at the message for a long time before responding. "She's happy because we figured out how to stop fighting and start cooperating. We did it together." Together. I like that word. Me too. New Year's came and went. Sophie was in 3rd grade, thriving academically and socially. Rose was growing, hitting milestones, becoming a person. Adrian's career continued its upward trajectory. Talk of a vice president position in a few years if he kept performing. In February, almost 2 years after that first custody hearing, Adrian ran into Gregory Whitmore at a grocery store. Whitmore looked smaller somehow, diminished. He was in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, pushing a cart with only a few items. They made eye contact. Whitmore's face went pale. "Adrian, Don't," Adrian said quietly. "Just don't." "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did. I was angry and vindictive, and I tried to hurt you because I could." Adrian looked at this man who'd tried to destroy his life, who'd filed false reports and sent threatening messages and used the system as a weapon. He waited for the anger, for the satisfaction of seeing him brought low. Instead, he just felt tired. "Okay," Adrian said, "I accept your apology. But stay away from me and my family." He walked away without looking back. Some people didn't deserve more than that. Acknowledgement and distance. At home, Sophie was building a block tower with impressive engineering. Rose was in her bouncy seat, watching with wide eyes. "Dad, look how tall I made it." "That's incredible, Soph. Is it structurally sound?" "I don't know what that means, but probably." Adrian sat down next to her, and Rose made a happy gurgling sound. "She likes you," Sophie said. "Babies can tell when people are nice." "I like her too." "Dad, are you happy, like really happy?" He thought about it. The job that challenged and fulfilled him. The daughter who was growing into someone remarkable. The strange, functional family they'd built from the wreckage of a failed marriage. The stability, the peace, the knowledge that he'd survived everything thrown at him and come out stronger. "Yeah, Soph, I'm really happy. Are you?" "Super happy. I have 2 houses and 2 parents who don't fight, and a baby sister and the best rock collection in my grade. What else could I want?" "Nothing. You've got it all figured out." Sophie knocked over her tower, and blocks scattered everywhere. Rose laughed, her first real laugh, and they all looked at her in amazement. "She laughed," Sophie shrieked. "Dad, did you see? She laughed." "I saw. That's a big deal." Sophie immediately started rebuilding her tower, narrating the process to Rose, who watched with serious concentration. Adrian pulled out his phone and took a picture. His daughter, his sort of daughter, this moment of ordinary perfection. Then he sent it to Lillian with the caption, "Rose laughed for the first time. Sophie's taking full credit." Lillian responded immediately. "Of course she is. That's our girl." Our girl. Both of their girls now, in different ways. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, Adrian stood in her doorway watching her sleep. Mr. Trunks was tucked under her arm, her dinosaur backpack hanging on the chair, her rock collection lined up on the shelf with careful precision. She'd asked if he was happy, and he'd said yes. But it was more than that. He was content in a way he'd never been, even when he was married. Because this life, this complicated, imperfect, hard-won life, was built on truth instead of pretense, He'd fought for Sophie when everyone said he'd lose. He'd rebuilt himself when it would have been easier to give up. He'd learned to co-parent with someone he'd once considered his enemy. He'd proven that love was more than resources, that showing up mattered more than showing off, that the measure of a parent wasn't their bank account, but their presence. The courtroom where he'd stood 2 years ago, broke and desperate and afraid, felt like another lifetime. That Adrian had been fighting to keep what he had. This Adrian had built something better than he'd imagined. His phone buzzed one more time. Marcus, saw the news about your VP track. Well deserved. Remember when you could barely afford my services? Look at you now. Adrian smiled. Look at him now indeed. He turned off the lights and went to his own room. Tomorrow he'd wake up early, make Sophie breakfast, get her to school, go to work, come home, help with homework, make dinner, read stories. The same routine he'd done 1,000 times, the same routine he'd do 1,000 more. Nothing about it was glamorous. Nothing about it proved anything to anyone who didn't already know him. But it was his, earned through every sacrifice and struggle and moment of doubt. In that cold courtroom 2 years ago, everyone had looked at him and seen failure. They'd seen a broke single dad in a wrinkled shirt who couldn't possibly provide what his daughter needed. They'd already decided he'd lost before he'd even spoken. But Adrian had learned something important in those 2 years. Something about revenge that had nothing to do with destroying your enemies or proving them wrong in spectacular fashion. The real revenge was simpler and more profound. It was showing up every day. It was being the person they said you couldn't be. It was building a life so solid, so full, so genuinely good that their judgment became irrelevant. He didn't need Lillian to admit she'd been wrong about him. He didn't need Whitmore's disbarment to feel vindicated. He didn't need the judge or the lawyers or anyone else to acknowledge what he'd accomplished. Because Sophie knew. She came home to him every day. She called him when she was scared or happy or needed help with math homework. She trusted him with the small, important moments that made up her childhood. That was the victory that mattered. Some people spend their lives seeking revenge through destruction. They want to see their enemies brought low, want proof that they were right and everyone else was wrong. They measure success by how much damage they can inflict. But Adrian had discovered a different kind of revenge. The kind that didn't require anyone else's downfall. The kind that was just living well, loving fiercely, and refusing to be broken by people who thought they could define his worth. He'd walked out of that courtroom with Sophie's hand in his, and he'd never looked back. He'd proven that he couldn't be replaced, not because he was perfect or wealthy or powerful, but because he was present, because he knew her, because he'd chosen her every single day, even when that choice cost him everything else. That was the revenge. Not a moment, but a lifetime. Not a victory, but a commitment. Not proving them wrong, but making their opinion irrelevant by building something they couldn't touch or take away. And on nights like this, when he stood in his daughter's doorway watching her sleep peacefully in a home they'd fought for together, he understood that the best revenge wasn't making others suffer. It was refusing to let them make you suffer. It was taking everything they'd tried to use against you and turning it into the foundation of something beautiful. Sophie shifted in her sleep, mumbling something about rocks and sisters. Adrian smiled, closed her door gently, and went to bed himself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new moments to show up and be present, but he was ready for it. He'd been ready since that moment in the courtroom when he'd decided that losing wasn't an option, that Sophie was worth fighting for, that he would become whatever he needed to be to keep her. And he had. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but completely. He'd become the father she deserved, the co-parent Lillian needed, the man he'd always been capable of being when he stopped letting fear and judgment define him. That was the real story, not the courtroom drama or the evil lawyer or the happy ending. The real story was about a man who'd been counted out and decided to count himself in, who'd been told he wasn't enough and chose to be enough anyway, who'd fought not with weapons or words, but with simple, stubborn, everyday love. And in the end, that had been more powerful than anything else.